My husband texted me, "Happy anniversary, darling," while I sat just 2 tables away from him at the same restaurant. I watched him kiss another woman and order champagne for her. My name is Isadora, and I am 34 years old. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and until that night, I believed I had the most wonderful marriage anyone could ask for. When my phone lit up with his message, my heart filled with warmth for exactly 3 seconds. Then I looked up and saw him, my husband, sitting with another woman, kissing her like she was his whole world. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Trust me, you will want to hear how this night completely changed my life. I need to take you back to the beginning so you can understand why that moment shattered everything I thought I knew. I met Marcus 8 years ago at an art exhibition in Back Bay. He was 30 years old then, working as a mid-level financial analyst at a small investment firm. I was 26, running my own interior design business that I had started right out of college. The gallery was crowded that evening, filled with people sipping wine and pretending to understand abstract art. I was standing in front of a painting that honestly looked like someone had thrown buckets of paint at a canvas when I heard a voice beside me. He said the artist clearly had a lot of feelings. I laughed because that was exactly what I was thinking. We spent the next 2 hours walking through the exhibition together, and by the end of the night, he had my phone number. Marcus did not call me the next day like I expected. He waited 3 days, which drove me absolutely crazy. When he finally did call, he asked me to dinner at a little Italian restaurant in the North End. That dinner turned into another dinner, and then another. For 6 months, Marcus pursued me with a patience I had never experienced before. He sent flowers to my studio on random Tuesdays. He remembered every small detail I told him about my life. He met my parents and charmed them completely. My mother pulled me aside after that first meeting and whispered that I had found a good one. I believed her because I believed him. The proposal came on a golden October afternoon in Beacon Hill. We were walking down Acorn Street, the cobblestones uneven beneath our feet, autumn leaves drifting down around us like something out of a movie. Marcus stopped suddenly and turned to face me. He told me that I had become his favorite person in the world, that he could not imagine his life without me in it. Then he got down on one knee and asked if I would marry him. I said yes before he even finished the question. Our wedding was small and beautiful. Just 80 guests gathered in a historic church in Charlestown. My father cried walking me down the aisle. Marcus cried when he saw me in my dress. We wrote our own vows, and I still remember every word he said. He promised to choose me every single day. He promised that I would never feel alone as long as he was alive. He promised that our love would only grow stronger with time. The first few years of our marriage felt like living inside a dream. We rented a small apartment in Cambridge while we saved money, eating takeout on the floor, because we could not afford a dining table yet. Marcus worked long hours climbing the corporate ladder, while I grew my design business one client at a time. We cooked dinner together on weekends, trying recipes we found online, and laughing when they turned out terrible. We took road trips to Cape Cod on long weekends, staying in cheap motels and walking on the beach at sunset. After 3 years of marriage, we finally saved enough for a down payment on our own place. We bought a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Southend with exposed brick walls and tall windows that let in golden afternoon light. I spent months decorating every corner, choosing each piece of furniture with care. Marcus would come home from work and find me rearranging pillows for the 10th time, and he would just smile and tell me it looked perfect. His career took off around the same time. He got promoted to senior analyst, then to manager, and finally to director of financial operations. The company moved him to a bigger office in downtown Boston. His salary tripled. We started eating at nicer restaurants, taking real vacations instead of road trips. He bought me jewelry for our anniversaries, each gift more expensive than the last. But we kept one tradition sacred. Every year on our anniversary, we went back to La Maison on Newbury Street. It was the restaurant where we had our first real date, where Marcus had told me he was falling in love with me over a plate of coq au vin. The owner knew us by name. She always gave us the same table by the window, the one with the view of the street outside. Last year, for our 6th anniversary, Marcus gave me a pearl necklace that must have cost more than my first car. He clasped it around my neck at our table at La Maison, then held my hands and looked into my eyes. He told me that 6 years with me felt like 6 minutes, that he hoped we would have 60 more. I wore that necklace every day after that, touching it whenever I missed him during long work days. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. They started about 6 months before that terrible anniversary night, small changes that I explained away, because I trusted him completely. Marcus began working late more often. He said there was a major project, a complicated merger that required his constant attention. I believed him, because he had always been dedicated to his job. He would come home at 10 or 11 at night, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open. I would heat up dinner for him and rub his shoulders while he ate. Then came the phone calls. He started taking them outside on our balcony, even in cold weather. When I asked why, he said he did not want to disturb me with work talk. I thought that was considerate. I did not think to question it. His phone habits changed too. He used to leave it lying around the apartment, never caring if I saw his messages or emails. Now the phone was always in his pocket screen, facing down whenever he set it on a table. He changed his password one day, and when I asked about it casually, he said the company required more security on personal devices. I accepted that explanation without a second thought. My mother-in-law Eleanor visited us a few weeks before our anniversary. She adored her son in a way that bordered on worship. Over tea in our living room, she told me how lucky I was to have married such a wonderful man. She said Marcus was exactly like his father, loyal and devoted and incapable of dishonesty. I nodded along, believing every word. If someone had told me then what I would discover on our anniversary night, I would have laughed in their face. Marcus would never betray me. He loved me. He had promised. But promises, I would learn, mean nothing to someone who never intended to keep them. The morning of our 7th anniversary started perfectly. I woke up before Marcus, slipping out of bed quietly to prepare a special breakfast. Pancakes with fresh strawberries, his favourite. Freshly squeezed orange juice. Coffee made exactly the way he liked it, with just a splash of cream. I set the table with our nice dishes, the ones we only used for special occasions. I even picked flowers from the small garden on our balcony to put in a vase as a centerpiece. Everything looked beautiful. I felt beautiful, filled with excitement for the day ahead. Marcus came out of the bedroom around 8, already dressed in his suit. He seemed distracted, checking his phone even as he sat down at the table. I tried not to let it bother me. Work was demanding, I reminded myself. He ate quickly, complimenting the pancakes, but barely looking at me. Then he glanced at his watch and said he had to run. There was an important meeting, he could not miss something about quarterly reports that needed his immediate attention. He promised he would make it up to me that evening. I walked him to the door, and he kissed me on the forehead. Just the forehead. Not the lips, the way he used to every morning. He said he would see me at La Maison at 7 o'clock sharp. He said to wear that red dress he loved. He said tonight would be special. After he left, I stood in our empty apartment, feeling the first tiny crack in my happiness. Something felt different this morning, though I could not name what exactly. Marcus seemed distant, rushed, like he was already somewhere else in his mind. I pushed the feeling aside and focused on preparing for our special night. I spent the afternoon at the salon getting my hair done loose waves that fell past my shoulders, the way Marcus always admired. I had my nails painted a deep red to match my dress. I came home and did my makeup carefully, taking extra time to get everything perfect. The red dress hung in my closet like a promise. I had worn it to our anniversary dinner 3 years ago, and Marcus could not take his eyes off me all night. He said I looked like a movie star. I hoped to see that same look in his eyes tonight. I had his gift wrapped and ready on the dresser. A silver watch from a jeweler on Boylston Street engraved on the back with our initials and wedding date. It had cost me nearly 2 months of savings, but Marcus was worth it. He was worth everything. At 5 o'clock, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen, and I answered with a smile already forming on my lips. His voice sounded strange, rushed, and apologetic. He said something had come up. A client from New York had flown in unexpectedly and demanded a meeting. The meeting had turned into a dinner invitation that he could not refuse without risking the entire account. He was so sorry. He knew how much tonight meant to us both. I heard noise in the background. Voices, maybe music. And then I heard it clearly. A woman laughing high and bright. The sound was close to him, too close. I asked who that was. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Marcus paused for half a second too long. Then he said it was just someone at the office. The client's assistant, nothing important. He said he would make this up to me tomorrow, that we would celebrate properly then. He told me he loved me and hung up before I could respond. I stood in my bathroom with the phone pressed to my ear even after the call ended. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror. Red dress, perfect hair, carefully applied makeup. All for nothing. The tears came before I could stop them. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried, ruining the mascara I had spent 20 minutes perfecting. I felt foolish and small, dressed up with nowhere to go, abandoned on a night that was supposed to celebrate our love. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Margot. She was checking in to see how I was preparing for my special night. I typed back what happened, my fingers shaky on the screen. Margot called immediately. Her voice was furious on my behalf, saying this was unacceptable, asking how he could do this to me on our anniversary. She insisted that I should not sit home alone in that beautiful dress. She was coming to pick me up. We were going out. I tried to protest, but Margot would not hear it. She arrived at my apartment 30 minutes later, wearing her own little black dress and carrying her righteous anger like a shield. She fixed my ruined makeup while lecturing me about how I deserved better than being cancelled on via phone call. Margot suggested we should go to La Maison anyway. The reservation was made, the table was waiting. Why should I waste a perfectly good evening because Marcus chose work over me? We could have a girls' night, instead drink champagne and toast to our friendship. The idea appealed to me more than sitting home alone with my sadness. I agreed, and we took a taxi to Newbury Street. La Maison looked magical that evening. Soft lighting glowing from the windows, well-dressed couples entering through the heavy wooden doors. The hostess recognized me and smiled warmly. She mentioned it was lovely to see me again and asked if Mr. Thompson would be joining later. I felt Margot squeeze my hand supportively. I told the hostess that it would just be the two of us tonight. She led us to a table near the back of the restaurant, not our usual spot by the window, but still nice enough. Margot ordered wine immediately, insisting we were going to enjoy ourselves despite everything. I tried to match her enthusiasm, but my heart was not in it. We looked at menus and talked about small things. Margot told me about her work, about a terrible date she had last week, about her plans to adopt a cat. I listened and nodded, grateful for her presence, trying not to think about where Marcus was and who he was with. The waiter brought our wine. Margot raised her glass to female friendship and moving forward. I clinked my glass against hers and took a long sip. Maybe this evening would not be so bad after all. Maybe I was overreacting to one cancelled dinner. Maybe Marcus really was just doing his job. Then Margot's face changed completely. She had been looking over my shoulder toward the front of the restaurant. Her expression froze, then shifted to something I could not read. Horror, maybe, or disbelief. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. I asked her what was wrong. She did not answer. She just kept staring at something behind me. I started to turn around. The moment I turned my head, my entire world collapsed. There, walking through the entrance of La Maison with his hand on the small of another woman's back, was Marcus, my husband, my partner of 8 years, the man who had kissed my forehead this morning and promised me a special evening. He looked different than when he left for work, happier somehow, more relaxed. He was smiling in a way I had not seen in months, his whole face lit up with joy. And that joy was directed at the woman beside him. She was beautiful in an obvious, impossible way, blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, red lips curved into a confident smile, a green dress that hugged her figure perfectly. She moved like someone who knew exactly how attractive she was, comfortable in her own skin, comfortable with my husband's hand on her body. The hostess greeted them like old friends. She led them to a table across the restaurant from us, a table for 2, set with candles and fresh flowers. Marcus pulled out the chair for his companion, then leaned down to whisper something in her ear. She laughed that same high, bright laugh I had heard on the phone. They sat facing each other, which meant Marcus had his back to me. He never saw me. He had no idea that his wife was sitting 15 feet away, watching him betray their entire marriage. Margot grabbed my hand under the table. Her grip was so tight it almost hurt. She whispered my name, asking what I wanted to do, offering to leave right now if I needed. I could not speak. I could not move. I could only stare at the back of my husband's head while he reached across the table to take another woman's hand. A waiter approached their table. Marcus ordered champagne without looking at the menu. Dom Perignon. I heard him clearly because the restaurant had grown quiet around us, or maybe everything else had just stopped mattering. Dom Perignon. The champagne he always said was too expensive for normal occasions. The champagne he refused to order on our anniversaries because house champagne was good enough. He was ordering it for her without a second thought. The waiter returned with the bottle, presenting it with ceremony before popping the cork. Marcus poured 2 glasses, handed one to his companion, and raised his own in a toast. I watched his lips move, but could not hear the words. Margot was speaking to me, her voice urgent and low. She said we should leave. She said this was torture, and I did not need to witness any more. She said she would take me home, and we would figure out what to do. But I could not leave. Some part of me needed to see everything. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening, to burn every detail into my memory, so I could never pretend it had not happened. The next hour passed like a nightmare I could not wake from. A man arrived with a bouquet of red roses, 12 perfect blooms, wrapped in elegant paper. He presented them to Marcus, who handed them to the blonde woman with a flourish. She buried her face in the flowers, then reached across the table to touch his cheek. They talked endlessly, leaning close, their voices too low for me to hear from across the room. But I could see the way he looked at her. It was the same way he used to look at me in the early days, like she was the most fascinating person in the world. Like nothing else mattered when she was near. At some point they ordered food, but neither of them ate much. They were too busy touching hands, exchanging glances, lost in each other. Marcus traced circles on her palm with his finger. She played with the cuff of his shirt. Every gesture screamed intimacy, familiarity, a relationship that had been developing for a long time. Margot ordered food for us too, though I have no memory of eating. She kept trying to distract me to turn the conversation elsewhere, but my eyes kept drifting back to that table. I was like a moth drawn to flame, unable to stop burning. Then my phone vibrated against the table. I looked down and saw a notification. A text message from Marcus. My husband, who was sitting 15 feet away with another woman. My husband, who had told me he was at a work dinner he could not escape. The message read, "Happy anniversary, darling. Sorry I could not be with you tonight. I love you more than words can say. We'll make it up to you tomorrow." I read the words 3 times. Each time they made less sense. He loved me more than words could say. He was sorry he could not be with me. He was going to make it up to me. I looked up from my phone just in time to watch him kiss her. It was not a quick kiss, not a friendly peck on the cheek. He cupped her face in his hands, the hands that had held me this morning, and pressed his lips to hers with unmistakable passion. The kiss lasted for several seconds, while I sat frozen with his lying message still glowing on my screen. Margot made a small sound of distress. Under the table, she gripped my hand so hard I thought my fingers might break. The kiss ended. Marcus pulled back with a satisfied smile, then lifted his champagne glass again. The woman touched her lips like she was savouring the moment. They clinked glasses and drank while I forgot how to breathe. The room around me became distant and strange. I heard other diners laughing, silverware clinking against plates, soft music playing from hidden speakers, normal sounds of a normal restaurant on a normal evening. None of it seemed real. My husband was 2 tables away kissing another woman, and he had just texted me a declaration of love. The absurdity of it was almost funny, except nothing about this was funny at all. Margot leaned close and whispered that she was so sorry. She asked again if I wanted to leave. She said nobody would blame me for walking out right now. I finally found my voice. It came out steadier than I expected, cold and hard, like something forged in fire. I said no. I said I was staying. I said I needed to know everything. Margot looked at me like I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. But something had shifted inside me during those terrible minutes. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something colder. Something that wanted to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made any decisions. I straightened in my chair and picked up my wineglass. My hands were trembling, but I forced them steady. I took a sip and set the glass down precisely. Then I turned to Margot and told her we were going to sit here and watch. We were going to find out everything we could. And then I was going to decide what to do. Margot nodded slowly. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Without a word, she angled it toward Marcus and his companion and began recording video. She was gathering evidence, doing what needed to be done without being asked. I loved her more in that moment than I ever had before. For the next 2 hours we observed. The waiter came by their table frequently, and each time I heard a little more. The woman's name was Diana. Marcus called her sweetheart baby, my love. He spoke to her with an easy familiarity that suggested months of practice. Diana touched the necklace at her throat, a delicate gold chain with a pendant I could not quite see. She mentioned that Marcus had given it to her for her birthday last month. That was in early September, which meant their relationship had been going on since at least August, maybe longer. Marcus ordered a second bottle of champagne. The bill for their evening was probably approaching $500 already. He did not seem to care. He was expansive and generous in a way he had not been with me in years. I watched Diana lean forward and ask something in a low voice. I could not hear the question, but I heard his answer clearly enough. He said it was almost over. He said he just needed a few more months to get everything sorted. He said the divorce would be simple, because his wife did not suspect anything. The divorce. He was planning to divorce me. He was sitting in our restaurant at what could have been our table, planning the end of our marriage with his mistress. Diana pressed him for details. She wanted to know the timeline. She wanted to know when they could stop hiding. Marcus laid out his plan like a business proposal. First, he needed to move some money around, protect his assets. Then he would tell me he was unhappy that the marriage was not working. He would be reasonable about the apartment, the finances. He would make sure everything was handled quietly, no drama, no scandal. He called me predictable. He said I would probably cry for a few weeks and then get over it. He said I was boring, that our marriage had become a chore. He made me sound like an obstacle to be managed rather than a person who had built a life with him. Each word landed like a physical blow. I sat perfectly still and absorbed them all. Diana asked about their future. What would happen once I was out of the picture? Marcus smiled that brilliant smile and painted a vision of their life together. They would move to New York, start fresh somewhere nobody knew his history. He would find a job at a bigger firm. She would continue her career. They would travel, live well, be happy. He mentioned Miami, a trip they had taken together the month before. The trip, he told me, was a work conference. Diana laughed about the resort, the spa treatments, the champagne breakfast they had on their balcony every morning. She teased him about getting sunburned on the beach because he refused to wear sunscreen. I remembered that trip. Marcus had come home with a tan and a story about boring meetings. He brought me a cheap souvenir from the airport gift shop. Meanwhile, he had been lying on a beach with another woman living out the vacation he always promised me, but never delivered. Diana touched the designer bag hanging from her chair. Another gift from Marcus, she mentioned casually. She described shopping together, how he insisted she buy only the best. Hermes, Chanel, Cartier. Names I recognized from windows I only looked into, never entered. For my birthday 3 months ago, Marcus had given me flowers and a card. The card was generic, clearly purchased at the last minute. I told myself it was fine, that gifts did not matter, that his love was enough. Now I understood the truth. His generosity was not gone. He had simply redirected it to someone he actually wanted. The evening wore on. They ordered dessert to share, feeding each other bites with disgusting intimacy. Marcus wiped chocolate from the corner of Diana's mouth with his thumb. Diana kissed his palm. Every gesture was a knife in my chest. Margot kept recording. Her phone battery was dying, so she plugged it into a portable charger and continued. She was building a case against my husband, evidence that would matter when the time came. Around 10:00, Diana excused herself to use the restroom. For the first time, I got a clear look at her face as she walked past our table. She was even more beautiful up close, with perfect bone structure and flawless makeup. She glanced at me, briefly, smiled politely at a stranger, and continued walking. She had no idea who I was. She had no idea that the woman she smiled at was the wife her lover was planning to discard. While Diana was gone, Marcus checked his phone. I saw him typing something and braced myself. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Another message. Thinking of you, beautiful. Missing you tonight. Cannot wait to see you tomorrow. I stared at the words until they blurred. Beautiful. Missing me. Could not wait to see me. All lies, each one more painful than the last. He was sitting in a restaurant with another woman typing love messages to me like some kind of twisted game. Margot read the message over my shoulder. She called him a word I will not repeat, her voice tight with controlled rage. She asked if I had seen enough. I had. But I was not done yet. Diana returned from the restroom, touching up her lipstick. She slid back into her chair and immediately reached for Marcus's hand. They looked like a couple who had been together for years, comfortable and content in each other's presence. Marcus signaled for the check. Their evening was winding down, and I knew I needed to make a decision. I could leave now, go home, pretend I never saw anything. I could confront him tomorrow or next week or never. I could bury this knowledge and let it poison me slowly from the inside. Or I could do something else entirely. I looked at Margot and told her I was going to talk to them. She started to protest, but something in my face stopped her. She asked if I was sure. I told her I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I finished the last of my wine and set down the glass. I checked my reflection in my phone screen. My makeup was perfect. My red dress was perfect. I looked exactly like a woman attending a special anniversary dinner, which was technically true. It just was not the anniversary I had planned. The waiter brought their check. Marcus paid with a credit card, our joint credit card, the one attached to the account that held our shared savings. He was funding his affair with our money, our future, our dreams. That detail pushed me over the edge. I stood up from my chair. Margot stood with me ready to intervene if needed. I smoothed my dress, lifted my chin, and walked directly toward their table. Marcus did not see me approach. He was signing the receipt, adding what looked like a generous tip. Diana was checking her phone, laughing at something on the screen. Neither of them noticed the wife in the red dress coming to end their perfect evening. I stopped directly beside their table and said his name. Marcus looked up. For 1 second, his face went completely blank, like his brain could not process what his eyes were seeing. Then the blood drained from his cheeks. He went pale, then grey, then almost green. He looked like a man watching his own execution. Diana looked confused. She glanced between Marcus and me, trying to understand why a stranger had interrupted their romantic dinner. She asked if she could help me with something. I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on Marcus, watching him squirm in his expensive suit. I told him, "Happy 7th anniversary, darling." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No words came out. Diana's confusion deepened. She repeated the word anniversary like she was testing its meaning. She looked at Marcus and asked what this woman was talking about. I answered before he could find his voice. I told Diana that I was Isadora Thompson, his wife. 7 years of marriage as of today. I told her I had been sitting across the restaurant watching them all evening. I mentioned that I particularly enjoyed the champagne, the roses, and the kiss. Diana's face went through several transformations. Confusion became shock. Shock became horror. Horror became fury, directed not at me, but at the man sitting across from her. She called Marcus a liar. She said he told her his marriage was over. She said he promised he was separated, just waiting for the paperwork to finalize. She said she never would have started this if she knew he was still living with his wife. Marcus finally found his voice. He started babbling explanations, saying it was complicated, saying he could explain everything, saying this was not what it looked like. Every excuse was more pathetic than the last. I pulled the gift box from my purse, the one containing the engraved watch. I set it on the table in front of him. I told him that was his anniversary present. I mentioned that I had the back engraved with our initials and wedding date. I suggested he could pawn it to pay for the champagne. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were watching openly, their meals forgotten. Waiters had stopped in their tracks. Even the background music seemed to pause. I turned to Diana and told her I hoped Marcus treated her better than he treated me. I said that based on what I had observed, she was just the next chapter in his book of lies. I suggested she ask him about the phone calls he takes outside. I suggested she wonder what happens when his current story becomes boring and predictable too. Diana stood up so fast, her chair nearly fell over. She grabbed her Hermes bag and called Marcus something unprintable. She said they were done. She said she could not believe she wasted 8 months on him. She stormed toward the exit, leaving Marcus alone at the table with his lying heart and my anniversary gift. He grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. His grip was too tight, almost painful. He begged me to let him explain. He said it meant nothing. He said Diana was a mistake, a moment of weakness. He said he loved me, only me, always me. I pulled my arm free and looked at him with steady eyes. I told him I heard everything he said tonight. Miami, the divorce plans. How boring I am. I told him he wanted a divorce, so he should consider it done. But on my terms, not his. I walked away from the table without looking back. Margot was waiting by the entrance, ready to whisk me out of the restaurant and into the cold night air. She had her arm around me before we even reached the sidewalk. In the taxi home, I finally let myself fall apart. The tears came in waves, sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the future I thought we were building. I cried for the woman who woke up that morning believing she was loved. Margot held me through all of it. She did not offer empty comfort or useless platitudes. She just let me cry and promised to be there whatever came next. When we reached my apartment, I looked up at the windows of the home I had created with such care. Every piece of furniture, every decorative touch, every memory held within those walls was tainted now. Nothing would ever look the same. I told Margot this was the last night I would cry over Marcus. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. Starting tomorrow, I would fight. I did not sleep that night. I sat on my couch in my red dress, staring at the wall, planning my next moves. By dawn, I had a clear picture of what needed to happen. At 9:00 sharp, I called the best divorce attorney in Boston. Patricia Hawkins had a reputation for being ruthless on behalf of her clients, particularly women who had been wronged by cheating husbands. Her office told me she was booked for weeks, but when I briefly explained my situation, they found an opening that same afternoon. Patricia was exactly what I needed. 60 years old, with silver hair and sharp eyes, she looked at the evidence Margot had gathered and smiled like a wolf who had spotted prey. She told me this was a solid case. She told me Massachusetts law would not look kindly on a husband who spent marital assets on an affair partner. She told me I deserved everything and more, and she was going to make sure I got it. We spent 3 hours going through every detail of my marriage. Bank accounts, property investments, retirement funds. I knew Marcus made good money, but I did not realize how much he had been hiding. Patricia's investigators found offshore accounts, shell companies, patterns of spending that told a clear story of betrayal. The condominium in South End was purchased with money from both of us, but the deed was in both our names. Marcus could not sell it without my signature. The joint accounts held savings we had built together over 7 years. Any attempt to drain them would look very bad in court. Patricia laid out our strategy. We would move fast before Marcus had time to hide more assets. We would file for divorce on grounds of adultery with documented evidence. We would request exclusive use of the marital home during proceedings. We would make his life very uncomfortable very quickly. I signed the retainer agreement without hesitation. Whatever Patricia cost, Marcus was going to pay. That evening, Marcus finally came home. I was waiting for him in the living room, the divorce papers already drafted and ready on the coffee table. He walked through the door, looking exhausted and defeated, clearly expecting a tearful confrontation. Instead, he found me calm and composed, sitting in the armchair like a queen on her throne. He started apologizing immediately. He said Diana meant nothing. He said it was a midlife crisis, a terrible mistake. He said he would do anything to fix things between us. He got down on his knees and actually cried, tears streaming down his face as he begged for another chance. I listened to every word. Then I slid the divorce papers across the table and told him to sign. His expression shifted from desperate to angry. He accused me of overreacting. He said every marriage had problems. He said I was throwing away 7 years over one small mistake. He called me cold, heartless, vindictive. I told him that Diana was not a small mistake. I told him that 8 months of lying was not a crisis. I told him that planning to divorce me while texting me love messages was not something I could forgive or forget. He refused to sign. He said he would fight this. He said his lawyers would destroy me in court. He stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. I told her he was going to be difficult. She laughed and said she had expected nothing less. She said difficult husbands were her specialty. The next few months were a battlefield. Marcus hired his own attorney, a flashy man who specialized in protecting wealthy men from the consequences of their actions. They tried every tactic possible to minimize my settlement. They claimed Diana was a recent development, that the relationship was not serious, that I had no right to compensation for emotional distress. Patricia systematically dismantled every argument. The videos Margot recorded showed clear evidence of a long-term affair. Bank statements proved Marcus had spent over $40,000 on Diana in 8 months. Credit card receipts from Miami documented a luxury vacation that Marcus claimed was a business trip. His company got involved when rumors about the affair started circulating. Apparently, dating a subordinate at a partner firm violated several ethics policies. Marcus was asked to resign quietly or face public termination. He chose resignation, which meant his income suddenly dropped to 0. Diana predictably ended things completely once the money stopped flowing. Patricia found her through social media and obtained a statement confirming the duration and nature of the affair. Diana wanted nothing more to do with Marcus. She called him manipulative and described how he had convinced her his marriage was already over. I did not feel satisfied by her testimony. Diana had made her own choices, continuing the affair, even after learning Marcus had lied about being separated. But her confirmation of the timeline helped establish a pattern of deception that the court could not ignore. The final hearing came 6 months after that terrible anniversary dinner. Marcus looked diminished in his expensive suit, his hair grayer, his face lined with stress. He barely looked at me across the courtroom. The judge ruled decisively in my favor. I kept the condominium in Southend. I received a substantial portion of our shared assets. Marcus was ordered to pay ongoing support until the property division was complete. He walked out of the courthouse without a home, without a job, and without the dignity he once valued so highly. I did not celebrate. There was no joy in watching someone I once loved suffer, even someone who had betrayed me so completely. But there was relief. There was closure. There was finally an end to the nightmare. Patricia shook my hand outside the courthouse. She told me I had handled everything with grace and strength. She told me most clients fell apart during divorce proceedings, but I had stayed focused and determined throughout. She said I should be proud of myself. I thanked her and walked alone to my car. The Boston skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, beautiful and indifferent to my small human drama. I had lost a husband, but gained something more valuable. I had gained my freedom. The first year after my divorce was the hardest thing I had ever lived through. Some mornings, I woke up reaching for a body that was not there, forgetting for one terrible moment that everything had changed. Some nights, I lay awake, replaying our entire relationship, searching for earlier signs I should have seen. I threw myself into work as a distraction. My interior design business had suffered during the months of legal battles, clients drifting away while I was too consumed by divorce to focus on their projects. I rebuilt it slowly, taking on small jobs at first, then gradually working up to bigger commissions. Each successful project reminded me that I was capable, talented, worthy of success on my own terms. Margot was my constant companion during those dark months. She showed up with wine and takeout on nights when she knew I was struggling. She listened to me process the same emotions over and over without ever showing impatience. She reminded me who I was before Marcus, who I could be after him. I started going to yoga classes at a studio near my apartment. The practice helped me reconnect with my body, which I had ignored for years in favor of caring for everyone else. I learned to breathe through discomfort, to find stillness in chaos, to appreciate each day as it came. Therapy helped too. I found a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma, a kind woman named Dr. Francis, who helped me understand that Marcus's choices were not my fault. She taught me that being boring to someone who craved chaos was not a character flaw. She helped me recognize the manipulation tactics Marcus had used throughout our marriage, the gaslighting I had mistaken for love. I started journaling, filling notebooks with thoughts and memories and lessons learned. Writing things down helped me process emotions that felt too big to hold inside. Some pages were angry, filled with all the words I never said to Marcus. Some pages were sad, mourning the future we would never have. Some pages were hopeful, imagining a life I could build for myself. Spring came and went. Summer followed. By the time autumn arrived again, I was beginning to feel like myself. Not the self I was before Marcus, but someone new, stronger, wiser, more careful with my heart, but still open to possibility. I redecorated the condo, completely replacing every piece of furniture that held memories of my marriage. The transformation took weeks and cost more than I should have spent, but it was worth every penny. When I was done, I had a home that was entirely mine, reflecting only my taste and my vision for the future. One October evening, exactly a year after my divorce was finalized, I attended an art gallery opening in Back Bay. It was the same gallery where I had met Marcus all those years ago. Going there was an act of reclamation, a refusal to let him poison a place I loved. I was standing in front of a painting, an abstract piece in shades of blue and gold, when someone spoke beside me. He said the artist clearly had a lot of feelings. I turned to find a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He introduced himself as Theodore. He was an architect recently relocated to Boston from Chicago. He had come to the gallery because he heard it featured local artists, and he wanted to understand the creative community in his new city. We spent the next 2 hours walking through the exhibition together. He asked thoughtful questions about each piece. He listened when I explained the design principles I saw in the composition. He laughed at my terrible jokes and made even worse ones himself. At the end of the evening, he asked if he could take me to dinner sometime. I hesitated. The memory of Marcus was still too fresh, the fear of being hurt again too strong. I told Theodore I was not ready for dating. I told him my divorce was recent and my heart was still healing. He nodded, like he understood completely. He said there was no pressure. He said he enjoyed our conversation and would love to continue it as friends if I was comfortable with that. He gave me his card and said to call if I ever wanted to get coffee. I did not call for 3 months, but I thought about him often, about his easy kindness and genuine interest. Finally, in January, I sent him a text asking if that coffee offer was still open. We met at a small cafe near the harbour. What was supposed to be an hour conversation stretched into 4 hours. Theodore told me about his life, his family in Ohio, his love of sailing and terrible cooking. I told him about my business, my friends, my journey of healing over the past year. He did not push for more than I was ready to give. When I mentioned my divorce, he simply said he was sorry I went through that and asked if I wanted to talk about it. I shared some details, and he listened without judgment. He did not try to fix anything or offer advice. He just witnessed my story and thanked me for trusting him with it. We started meeting regularly after that. Coffee became lunch, Lunch became dinner. Dinner became long walks along the harbour as winter turned to spring. Theodore moved slowly, always letting me set the pace. He never made me feel rushed or pressured. Our first kiss happened on a rainy April evening. We were standing under an awning outside a restaurant waiting for the downpour to ease. Theodore turned to me with raindrops in his hair and said he had been wanting to kiss me for months, but would not do it without asking first. I pulled him close and kissed him instead of answering. That was 2 years ago. Theodore and I are still together, still learning each other, still building something beautiful and real. He moved into the South End condo last summer, adding his architectural drawings and mismatched furniture to my carefully curated space. The result is perfectly imperfect, a home that reflects both of us. He knows everything about Marcus and what happened. He knows that sometimes I still have nightmares about that anniversary dinner. He knows that trust does not come easily to me anymore. He is patient with all of it, never making me feel broken or difficult. Last month, Theodore asked if I wanted to go to dinner at La Maison. He knew the history of that restaurant, what it meant to me. He said he thought it might be time to create new memories there, to reclaim the space for something good. We went last weekend. I wore a blue dress this time, not red. We sat at a different table than I ever had with Marcus near the back, with a view of the kitchen. Theodore ordered champagne, the house champagne, and raised his glass to new beginnings. I looked around the restaurant that had witnessed both my lowest moment and now this new chapter. The tables were the same. The lighting was the same. But everything was different because I was different. Marcus lost everything after our divorce. Last I heard, he was working at a small firm in Connecticut, trying to rebuild his career from scratch. Diana moved to Los Angeles and blocked him on all social media. His mother still defends him to anyone who will listen, insisting that her precious son was led astray by a manipulative woman. I do not correct her. Some people cannot see the truth, no matter how clearly it is presented. I do not hate Marcus anymore. I used to think I would carry that hatred forever, let it fuel me through the hard days. But hatred is heavy, and I got tired of carrying it. What he did was unforgivable, but my freedom lies in refusing to be defined by his choices. Sometimes I think about the woman I was on that anniversary evening, sitting in my red dress with hope in my heart. I want to reach back through time and hold her, tell her that everything is going to be okay. The pain she was about to experience would nearly destroy her, but she would survive. She would more than survive. She would transform. Here is what I learned through all of this. The people who hurt us do not get to write the ending of our story. They might create a plot twist we never saw coming, might knock us down so hard we think we will never stand again. But we are the authors of our own lives. We decide what happens next. When Marcus texted me, "Happy anniversary," while kissing another woman, he thought he had all the power. He thought I would never find out. He thought I would continue being his predictable, boring wife until he was ready to discard me. He was wrong about all of it. That night did not break me. It freed me. It showed me who he really was, and forced me to become who I was always meant to be. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who does not accept betrayal. A woman who builds her own happiness instead of waiting for someone else to provide it. If you are watching this and you have been through something similar, I want you to know that survival is possible. The pain feels endless while you are in it, but it does fade. The person who hurt you does not deserve the power to define your future. You are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and worthy of so much more than you were given. Take back your story. Write yourself a better ending. And to everyone who has stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I shared this story, hoping it might help someone who needs to hear it. If my experience prevented even one person from staying in a relationship that was destroying them, then reliving these painful memories was worth it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that changed your life? How did you find the strength to move forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let us build a community of survivors who lift each other up. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more real stories from real people navigating the complicated, beautiful mess of human relationships. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter what someone else has done to you, the best chapter of your life can still be written. You hold the pen. Wishing you healing hope and the courage to believe in love again. Take care of yourself.